You see Mexico going woke.
But it's also almost the same viewpoint as what some of these extreme Muslim countries that see us as the enemy as well.
The U.S. is basically after maintaining its power under any means necessary. Some of them involved in mass killings of students, viewing the U.S. as a suspicious enemy. The American dream is no longer in America, it's in Mexico. The amount of Americans moving to Mexico is insane. 90% of all housing is being bought by Americans.
Why do we still have big influx of immigration from Mexico?
They have been for a long time. I think something after the stuff that went on with the Fast and the Furious, I think specifically, I think that led a lot of Mexican leadership into thinking about the U.S. as an antagonist more so than a friend, and it's been a growing sentiment amongst Mexicans in general, viewing the U.S. as an antagonist.
You say there's tension between our current administration and the Mexican administration currently, but they're both lean left. Why would they not see eye to eye if they both are kind of leaning left in the political spectrum?
Yeah, that's a great question. You see Mexico going woke. Like, we have gender pronouns on the books now. We have a whole trans rights movement going on in Mexico. It's going woke. Mexico, it's going woke as a whole, which is weird. Catholic traditional country,
right?
And you would think that would match up with some idealism with the United States, but more powerful than all of that, Mexico is very much federally going the whole pro Maduro, pro Putin, pro like
socialism, capitalism, communism, almost.
Yeah. So in general, the high-level politics in Mexico are all about that, about supporting Cuba, about the fact that the embargo is a human rights violation, about the elections being fair in Venezuela. This is where the mentality is right now, and in all of those ways, the U.S. doesn't matter how woke or left you are, they don't fit that narrative as a friend. So.
Wow. So we're the enemy no matter what. Even if we see eye to eye on a lot of the, ideologies, we're still the enemy.
Historically, again, if you see the conversations had in Mexico about the U.S., and again, I'm a part of some of those conversations every now and then. It's speaking of the pain that Mexico feels, discovering that most of the presidents in Mexico from the 60s, 70s, and 80s were on the CIA's payroll, and this is something that's some of the declassified documents coming out of the U.S. have told us now. So that leads to a lot of anger in Mexico, specifically when the U.S. and Americans talk about this being a Mexican issue, that's our fault and you should fix it. When the hands of the U.S. in Mexico are very clear as far as how they've influenced and who they put in power and who they made disappear and stuff like that in the past, and also their clear participation in some of the inception or the creation of some of these giant criminal enterprises that now operate on both sides of the border. So this is the sentiment that the political elites that are now in power in Mexico are utilizing to further their agenda. U.S. is bad. Look at what they did here. Look at what they did there. Look at what they're doing to our friends and compatriots in Venezuela and in Cuba, and look at all the ways they've meddled in the past against us.
That's usually the argument that people take when someone counters like my book or whatever, is how America's kind of had their hands in a lot of these countries who help destabilize a lot of the countries. But it's also almost the same viewpoint as what some of these extreme Muslim countries that see us as the enemy as well. Right now, just from this conversation alone, it makes me really nervous to think about like who sees us in a good light, because right now it doesn't feel like very many.
It's a perception I get as well. I mean, I'm new to this country. I have friends from all over. I have a very good friend of mine from Cuba, who's a former Cuban military guy. He hates America with his whole heart. But our friendship is stronger than that. But
Why is it? Same thing that we meddled in any kind of corruption?
That the U.S. is basically after maintaining its power under any means necessary, and its embargo of Cuba and its multiple attempts at coups in places like Venezuela, which are confirmed or not confirmed, who knows? And its meddling in places that have a lot of lithium in South America are very suspect. Most of the places that have lithium in them are currently in some sort of strife, Mexico included. So it's their version of I don't know. Again, some of these things are true. The U.S. did have
absolutely
Mexican presidents who were on the CIA's payroll. Some of them involved in mass killings of students and putting down communist motivated uprisings in Mexico during the Olympics. So some of this stuff is true. I mean, Kiki Camarena was probably not killed by cartel members.
Really?
Or at least not independent cartel members. Probably some sort of CIA operation was going on around his subsequent murder and abduction and murder. That's an open thing that gets talked about a lot in Mexico. How the CIA was responsible for his murder.
Wow.
So you have this. That's the sentiment, cultural sentiment right now against the United States. Not everywhere. Mind you, this is just close to the ground, middle class, lower middle class. So there's no middle class in Mexico almost now. It's pretty polarized, but basically that's kind of the sentiment that a lot of Mexicans have, viewing the U.S. as a suspicious enemy, basically, which is funny because the American dream is no longer in America; it's in Mexico. The amount of Americans moving to Mexico is insane. Tijuana, for example, my hometown, 90% of all housing is being bought by Americans. All of my dad's neighbors are gringos in Tijuana, which is fucking hilarious.
Well, if Mexico feels deeply about that, why do we still have a big influx of immigration from Mexico? Because there's still people that believe in the American dream?
I don't think so. I think that's a false statement. I don't think you have a big influx of Mexicans moving into the U.S. I think that's been on a downward trend.